Welcome to Academic Catalyst. Today we are looking into memorizing carbohydrate structures, which is required for your biochemistry course or for MCAT. Carbohydrates are compounds that contain carbon and water in the same ratio, so the general formula is CnH2O n times. Carbohydrates are classified as monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Some of the examples that you need to know with respect to structure are shown here. Among the monosaccharides, we need to be clear about glucose, mannose, and galactose, and also fructose and ribose are the other two examples. Among the disaccharides, it's maltose, lactose, and sucrose. And among the polysaccharides, it's starch, glycogen, and cellulose. Although this looks like a large number, it's very easy to memorize their structures. So let's start with monosaccharides. Monosaccharides further are classified into aldoses and ketoses. Aldoses are those that contain aldehyde group, and the aldehyde group is a C double bond O linked to a hydrogen. Usually this will be a terminal group. A ketose is going to have a ketonic group in between two carbons, so it will be an internal functional group. Let's start with glucose. It's an aldohexose, meaning it has an aldehyde group and it has 6 carbons. So we show the structure on the right with vertical lines and horizontal lines. Each of the points on the vertical line are representing carbons. So we have CH2OH as the last carbon, and the first carbon is the aldehyde group, and we have 4 carbons which are shown as the horizontal lines here. So let's look at glucose, which is an aldohexose. So it has an aldehyde group at the top and CH2OH at the bottom. And we have HOH on all the carbons except the third carbon, which will have OH on the left and H on the right. All the D sugars also have HOH orientation on the last chiral carbon, and in this case is the 5th carbon on glucose. Now let's compare D-glucose with D-mannose. The two of them are isomers of each other, specifically epimers. Now with the D-glucose, we have the CHO group at the top, CH2OH on the bottom, and every group will be HOH except for the C3, it will be OH on the left and H on the right. Now comparing that with mannose, so mannose is a C2 epimer, so apart from the C2, everything else will be the same. So we have CHO at the top, CH2OH at the bottom. It's a D sugar, so we will have the 5th or the last chiral carbon with HOH. C2 epimer, meaning the second carbon will have the opposite orientation. So we have HOH and glucose, it'll be OHH in mannose. The rest of the molecule will be exactly identical, and so it's very straightforward with respect to those carbons. So C2 epimer of glucose is mannose. It has everything else the same except for C2 orientation. Now let's compare glucose with galactose. Galactose is a C4 epimer. Let's practice the glucose structure again. Glucose has an aldehyde group at the top and CH2OH at the bottom. And we have HOH on all the carbons except this third carbon from the top. Now, with respect to galactose, as I said, it has a very similar structure as glucose. So we will write the same structure for all the carbons except for the 4th carbon. We start with the aldehyde group at the top, CH2OH at the bottom, and HOH because it's a D sugar again. And if you look at the 4th carbon, it is HOH on the glucose. There will be OHH on galactose. The rest of it is identical with glucose. So to summarize, if you're comparing glucose, mannose, and galactose, you have the same basic backbone. You have a 6-carbon chain. The top one will be an aldehyde, the last one will be CH2OH, and the 5th carbon will be having the orientation as HOH because they are all D sugars. So if you know the glucose structure, where you have all the carbons with HOH except the C3, then you can draw the structure for mannose, which is a C2 epimer. So you will change the orientation on the second carbon only with respect to glucose. And when it comes to galactose, which is a C4 epimer, you will change the orientation on the fourth carbon only. So the fourth carbon has HOH on glucose, it will be OHH on galactose. So if you know glucose, you can easily write mannose and galactose. So now let's look at D-glucose and compare it with D-fructose. Glucose, again, is an aldehexose. It contains an aldehydic group at the top, and it's a 6-carbon chain with the last carbon CH2OH. It's a D sugar, so which means the fifth carbon will have HOH orientation as it's shown. And the other carbons will have HOH except for C3, which will be OH on the left. Now the D-fructose is also a hexose consisting of 6 carbons, but it's a ketose, meaning he contains a ketonic group instead of an aldehydic group on the second carbon. So the first and the sixth carbon will have CH2OH, and the other carbons will have the same orientation as that in glucose. You can see that C3, 4, and 5 are exactly identical. The last monosaccharide is D-ribose. Ribose is a sugar present in nucleic acids. Specifically, RNA consists of ribose. Ribose is an aldopentose consisting of an aldehydic group and 5-carbon chain. You can see that there are 5 carbons in the structure. The topmost carbon will be an aldehyde, CHO, the last one CH2OH. It's a D sugar, so the last chiral carbon will have HOH. And ribose is easy because everything is HOH on the middle carbons as well. A deoxyribose will not contain the OH group on the C2 position. The C2OH is missing in the deoxyribose. Deoxyribose is found in DNA, and you can see that the second carbon is no longer chiral because it contains 2 hydrogens. The disaccharide, they consist of 2 sugar units. The 3 most important ones to know will be maltose, lactose, and sucrose. Maltose consists of 2 D-glucose units joined together by glycosidic linkage. Lactose consists of D-galactose and a D-glucose unit joined together. Sucrose, which is a fruit sugar, consists of D-glucose and D-fructose. Polysaccharides is the last category, and the 3 important ones in here are starch, glycogen, and cellulose. Starch is a plant storage polysaccharide that consists of alpha glucose units, and it consists of linear chain and branch chain. Glycogen is an animal storage polysaccharide which also consists of alpha glucose units, but it's heavily branched compared to starch. Finally, we have cellulose, which is a structural polysaccharide. This consists of beta glucose units. So structurally it is different, although it contains glucose, but it's a different isomer form of glucose. Well, that's it, folks. Thank you so much for watching this video at Academic Catalyst. We look forward to seeing you again soon.